G'day everyone. I'm Andra Keay, Managing Director of Silicon Valley Robotics and a visiting scholar at Citrus People and Robots Lab at the Universities of California. I want to talk today about navigating the global robotics iceberg and how we need to rethink everything that we think we know about the robotics industry. It's changed so much just in the last 10 years that these days I actually talk about the robotics 1.0 and robotics 2.0. In fact, robotics 1.0 is what we usually call the robotics industry, but it covers only the dirty, dull, dangerous jobs in the automobile industry and in metal machining, welding, spray painting, consumer electronics, and semiconductors. In fact, pretty much the same stupid robots that we've had since the 1970s. Now, there's nothing wrong with the robotics industry or the robotics 1.0 industry. It's growing 12 to 15% per annum. And in fact, in 2019, it was worth 48 billion US dollars if you count together the revenues plus software and peripherals. But perhaps what's more impressive is to consider the number of installations back in 2010 were only 100,000 per year, whereas now it's over 400,000 per year. But what's even more impressive is the growth of that tiny fraction of other robots, which is now 20% according to the global industry for the Federation of Robotics. Now, it's actually a lot larger than that. Those are the sorts of emerging innovative robotics companies that we track at Silicon Valley Robotics. And I call it actually the robotics 2.0 industry. It's the other robots that are in service robotics, that are working in every industry. In fact, Industry 4.0 is going to be robotics in every industry, in the same way that we've seen computers in every industry, with the difference that in computing, we haven't seen a global productivity change. And I think that robotics is where we're finally going to see that difference. In fact, we track what's happening in robotics, not by revenue or sales, because for most of the new robotics companies, they're less than 5 years old. They don't have revenue yet. We track by investment. And if we look at the equity investment, in fact, you can see that in the last 10 years, it's skyrocketed, going from less than $250,000 to 18 billion in the last year or so. And if we were to combine all of these figures, the investment figures, mergers and acquisitions, and revenue figures, then we actually have more of the whole picture, the whole iceberg, as it were, of robotics. And the robotics industry is now worth more than $150 billion globally. We still have a problem. It's a people problem, not a robot problem. We need a massive productivity shift to deal with our aging population. We used to have many workers for each retired person. Well, we're living longer, and we don't necessarily want to work longer. So we have to somehow make up for all those missing working age people. And as we haven't had a productivity increase since the Second World War, what's it going to take? Well, I think it's going to take robotics, because robots are computing manifested into the physical world and will have a huge impact on transportation, on energy, logistics, and all of our infrastructure. But we have another people problem, and that one is finding the people to build and deploy robots. Not only do we have a missing skills gap, that means we're missing at least 1 million people that we need to build robots in the next 2 years. But most companies do not have the money to deploy robots. The Fortune 500 companies have 75% of global revenue. 99.7% of the world's businesses are actually small businesses. And they employ 82.5% of the world's population. And they can't afford robots. How are they going to remain competitive globally? I think this is our major problem. We need to deploy robots in small, medium enterprises, not simply in the top tier companies. We need to empower everybody with access to robotics. So that was a quick tour of the global robotics iceberg. There's a lot happening that you didn't know about. And I think the problems that are coming up may be different to the problems that you've been thinking about in robotics. But I see a new era of global cooperation in front of us, and we can work together to develop a new era of robotics. Thank you.